I've just realised something. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Babergh and Mid Suffolk Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting of the 23rd of November. My apologies for juggling multiple screens here. Welcome anyway. I'm chairing the meeting today. My name is Alistair McCraw. Can I first remind you all of some domestic arrangements? Could you please ensure your microphones are turned off when they're not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, and that if you're attending the meeting to speak and you persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Could you please ensure that mobile phones are on silent or switched off? I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. And by entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. So now to introductions. I will ask the governance officer to carry out the introductions for us.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Today we have Councillor Ayres, Councillor Brewster, and Councillor Maybury, and I don't know if Councillor Humphreys has managed to join us as well this morning, who will be acting as witnesses for the committee. And we also have Emily Yule, Assistant Director for Law and Governance, and also the Monitoring Officer. And we also have Jan Robinson, who is the Corporate Manager for Governance and Civic Office, who will be presenting the report.
Thank you very much, Henriette. Can I move to the agenda, please, now? Item 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. I'll now ask the Governance Officer to have a roll call for the members present. That's members of the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Please reply when I call your name. Councillor Dawson. Okay. Councillor Gould.
Yes, good morning.
Councillor Grandin.
Good morning, here.
Councillor McCraw.
Present.
Councillor McLaren.
Present.
Councillor Osborne.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Councillor Carter.
Good morning.
Councillor Caston.
Present.
Councillor Epkinyoung.
Present.
Councillor Muller.
Present.
Councillor Scarf.
Present.
And Councillor Wellham.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare? Okay. If there are none, we shall move on to item 3, which is JOS 21, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 4th of September 2020. Now, there is a confidential minute attached to this, which would normally be heard at the end of the entire meeting, requiring us to go into a confidential session. But if there are no changes to be made to those minutes, or if there are any changes but we don't talk about them, we can in fact take the vote in one go. So are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? But if it's the confidential minute, please don't state what the point is, just that the point exists. If there are no points regarding accuracy, then could I have a proposer for those minutes?
Happy to propose, Chair. Yeah, happy to second.
Councillor Muller, seconded by Councillor Osborne. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Fine. In that case, I'll ask the Governance Officer to take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Please reply for, against or abstain. Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Caston.
For.
Councillor Epkinyoung.
For.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw,
4.
Councillor McLaren,
4.
Councillor Muller,
4.
Councillor Osborne,
4.
Councillor Scarf,
4.
and Councillor Willem.
4.
Chair, that is unanimous.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting on the 4th of September having been confirmed, they will now be signed at the next practicable opportunity, and that includes the confidential minute. We now come to item 4, JOS 20/2, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 21st of September 2020. As before, there was a confidential minute, so if there are any points regarding the accuracy, please don't state what that point was. If necessary, we will deal with that at the end of this meeting. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes?
Yeah. Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Does either of them concern the confidential minute?
No, Chair.
Okay. Could you state your points, please?
Yeah, it's Councillor Muller here, Chair. Paragraph 77.10, page 20. It's got an S after my name, so just a typo. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. I think that can be dealt with easily enough.
Certainly.
And Councillor Osborne, did you have a point? Perhaps I misheard.
It's Councillor Ekpenyong here.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Eppingham.
So on with regard to page 20 and 21 of the minutes, Chair, section 77.14 and 77.15, it says band, B-A-N-D, rather than ban. I believe should be B-A-N rather than B-A-N-D. And then on page 21, section 77.19, it says quit. I believe that should be quiet.
Okay, yes, could possibly change
Thank
the
you, Chair.
meaning to some extent. A quit life does sound like something different. Right, typo again. I suspect that's easily dealt with. So, the governance officer can confirm that.
Yes, of course, Chair.
Thank you. Could I have a proposer for those minutes, please? That's again including the confidential minute.
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. And a seconder?
Happy to second.
I didn't quite catch who that was.
Dave Muller. Happy to
Councillor
second.
Muller, thank you. Now ask the governance officer to take a roll call vote.
Certainly, Chair. Please can you reply for, against and abstain. Thank you. Councillor Carter,
4.
Councillor Caston,
4.
Councillor Epkinyoung,
4.
Councillor Gould, Councillor Gould. Okay, I'll get back to Councillor Gould. Councillor Grandin, Councillor Grandin,
Yes, 4. Sorry.
Councillor McCraw,
Sorry, I keep breaking up.
4.
Councillor McLaren,
4.
Councillor Muller,
4.
Councillor Osborne,
4.
Councillor Scarf,
4.
Councillor Willem,
4.
and Councillor Gould. Are you there?
I am here, sorry, 4.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Henriette. With those minutes approved, the minutes of the meeting on that date, 21st of September 2020, have been confirmed and will be signed at the next practicable opportunity. Item 5, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Thank you. Item 6, questions by the public.
None received.
And item 7, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. We now move to the substantive item on today's agenda, item 8, which is JOS 20/3, review of outside bodies. I would like to invite Jan Robinson, the Corporate Manager for Governance and Civic Office, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. So all councillors are probably aware that as a council, we appoint councillors every year at the annual council meetings to a range of outside bodies, both of which are national and local. Some of these organisations are statutory and some are organisation which the council contributes funding to, and then there are other organisations which have clear links to our joint strategic corporate plan. These appointments ensure that the council and residents' interests are represented with key agencies. What we did last year with Scrutiny was we done a complete review, and we agreed at that point that we would do an annual review. Well, as such, things were delayed because of the COVID-19, and a lot of organisations haven't actually met. But we have now carried out that review, and the results are listed in an appendix, really, which is attached, and that details all of the organisations we appoint to, their terms of reference, what the role of the councillor is, and how often they meet. And there's some recommendations from the organisations themselves that they don't look that they've told us that they're no longer meeting, or they've changed, and their organisation has now morphed into something else. So this report actually asks Scrutiny to have a look at those organisations and see if there's any there that we can recommend to council that we no longer support, if there's any additions that we want to support, and really to look at how we receive those reports back from those organisations, because I think we discussed it before but didn't come to any sort of firm conclusion. So I'd like Scrutiny to have a think about how we can regularly report on that.
Thank you.
I don't think there's too much more I can add to that, but I just wanted to point out that if you are appointed to an outside body from the council, you are indemnified against that. And so if you're a trustee, a director or whatever, if things were to go wrong, you would actually be covered by insurance by the council. If you're appointed in a private capacity to organisations, and I know a lot of councillors do get themselves appointed to various different boards, you are not insured by the council to do that. And I think that's quite a key message to councillors, to be really fully aware of their role when you're being appointed to various different bodies to be representatives. So that was the other key part that I wanted to highlight to councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jan. The information from the outside bodies you refer to, because we have a number of tables here. We have an overview of representation of what seems to be mostly statutory bodies, prepared by a research officer at the councils. We have a list of appointments, one for Babergh and one for Mid Suffolk. Is the table you're referring to containing is the broad spreadsheet which runs on pages 39 through 45? With the recommendations of the outside bodies? Yes,
Chair, that's the one that I'm referring to, with the supplementary document from the technical research officer as well.
I wonder when we reach that point, Jan, if you could help us through as we go through the list, a summary of those organisations that feel our representation is no longer required, just for the benefit of us all who may not have picked up on all the points in all the boxes. I think it would be very helpful if you could do that. Would that be okay? I apologise for giving you extra work to do.
That's absolutely fine. You're going to test my memory, but
I suspect
I'm sure Henriette will be able to assist, because she's got a better memory than me.
Absolutely. If we could just get some guidance on the bodies that feel that way or have recommendations to make to us, I think we'll probably need to work our way through it. The way I propose to approach this is by going through the various bodies and the lists in some of the orders, and the point out the table I'd like to start with is, if I can just find it here, is the outside bodies overall overview of representation on outside bodies paper presented and prepared for us, which starts off with the Assembly of the East of England Local Government Association. And I'm going to briefly go through these because that first body, for example, deals with the leaders of the two councils, and in fact is the Local Government Association. It's a representation, so it feeds in to and that's a statutory requirement, I would imagine. It's certainly a very useful one. So I don't suppose there's any of the members here present who have any direct experience of operating on that, unless any of us have been a leader of a council. Now, the next one is the Association for Suffolk Museums. Does anybody have any experience on that? Okay, now the next one I do know, we do have two members who have direct experience. Councillors Caston and Wellham, both appointed to the East Suffolk Internal Drainage Board. And I wonder if I can ask either of those councillors or both if they would like to provide a bit of background and experience that they've gained, both from the point of view of the body they're represented on, the effect on the council, and their own understanding, because those three things seem to me all to be benefits for the council and for ourselves. Councillors Caston and Wellham, would you be happy to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Shall I kick off first, or would you like to, Councillor Caston?
I'm happy for you to kick off. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So yes, we're both appointees to the East Suffolk Internal Drainage Board. That board is responsible for non-main river watercourses entering the North Sea between Shotley and Lowestoft. And as you can imagine, a lot of the focus is on the Old, the Ore and the Deben, and particularly areas around Minsmere. But there's also water management schemes in Debenham, which we've been looking at, and also the Gipping and its tributaries. We see papers about routine maintenance, flood defence schemes, such as the one at Snape and the one at Lowestoft. And there's a big water management scheme, which basically is pumping water just before it gets to the sea, where it's still fresh water. It's pumped back up river, but into farmers' reservoirs. That's a big scheme that is being undertaken at present, and it's being funded to a degree by the landowners who are going to benefit. But I mean, it's a win-win situation. And because now the board is looking at water management more than just drainage, there is a proposal to change the name to the East Suffolk Water Management Board. Now, my particular interest has been to try to ensure that the board or the officers of the board are consulted on planning applications. It was very, very hit and miss. There were a number of, from my experience on planning committee, there were a number of fairly big schemes which involved balancing ponds, which the board knew nothing about. Because the board is not a statutory consultee on planning matters, but they have got much more into planning and checking on planning applications, and they now have a team set up in order to do that. And that's a new team that was set up probably 2 or 3 years ago, which has been very good. And really one of my things is to try to get the board to take over more of these balancing ponds, because they are a concern in the long run, and because the district council has some responsibility for land drainage. If everything failed, it could come back to the district council to sort it out, and we don't really want that to happen. We have 3 meetings a year. There's fairly infrequent consultation and involvement between meetings, sometimes on a major planning application, for instance. The board is responsible for setting the budget and also the tax rate to be levied on landowners. So that's a quick overview of what we do. I think it's very useful. I found it very, very useful. I think it is useful for the district, particularly the involvement over the planning applications.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Councillor Caston?
No, thank you, Keith. That's brilliant. I think I found that very informative as well. There's some really good explanation of what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Would either of you, Councillors Wellham and Caston, mind if any members were to ask you any questions they may have?
happy to try.
Yeah,
Okay.
happy.
Does any member have a question they'd like to ask if they'd raise their hand on the screen, as Councillor Muller just has? Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. I was particularly interested to hear what Councillor Wellham had to say about balancing ponds. I don't know whether you're aware, Councillor Wellham, there's one off of cycle stroke footpath off of Gun Cotton Way. It's still owned by Crest Nicholson, who are the principal developer on Cedars Park. But there was a lot of invasive weed in this particular balancing pond, which they had to pay to have removed. Now, since that, they've put Harris fencing around this particular pond, which has always been knocked over, and it's an absolute disgrace. I don't know whether the Drainage Board would get involved with this, but I've written to Crest Nicholson several times, but they don't bother to respond to me. I know when I've discussed it with colleagues in public realm, they decided they wouldn't take responsibility of it because of the costs involved and sorting the problems out. But would this be something that the Drainage Board could consider in the future, Councillor Wellham, please? Thank you.
They could consider it, but the request to be involved has to come from the developer,
Right?
because it's going to cost money. There's always a commuted sum that goes with taking over balancing ponds, and I think there's either none at all or there possibly one in Mid Suffolk that has been taken over.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maybury, yeah, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, it's more of a comment. Am I allowed to mention that about invasive weed?
If it's relevant,
Yes.
to the group, yes.
Thank you. We actually have a problem with invasive weed in Lavenham, believe it or not, and this has been maintained by volunteers from the Suffolk Wildlife Trust. And I am suggesting to Councillor Muller and Councillor Wellham that that may be an avenue for you.
Fine.
Thank you.
A point perhaps to bear in mind. At this point, unless anybody else has any other questions, yes, Councillor Carter.
Yes, just a query regards this panel. Is it being fed into by the local groups who do cleanups, like on the Gipping? And is there any feed up in from the Environmental Forum where there's been reports of possible contaminants into the Gipping?
Because part of it, we've done an investigation into flooding in Lowestoft. That was several houses were damaged. It's really quite a broad subject of the meeting, but it's really interesting. I'm following the agricultural policies and things quite closely. And a lot of it also involves the farmers using the water, as Keith will know from the Drainage Board, recharging the aquifers and getting that water used on land or in factories where it's needed to. It's it's a really interesting committee and very useful.
Yeah, I think it's a remarkable piece of work being done by Matt Hullis and his team at Suffolk County Council. I'm always astonished by the degree of expertise, and as I say, it has sometimes had direct use, I would say, for this council. I don't know if your experience as well, Councillor Caston, in that by being able to discuss water management issues in terms of planning applications, even in my own ward. There have been occasions where I've sought clarification, and I've known that Matt Hullis will be able to find the answers for me and give a rational explanation. Right, I have two questions.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I totally agree with that, Councillor McCraw. I think Matt Hullis is one of the most competent people that I've met. It's amazing the broad area of his expertise, but he knows individually about every single case. It's fantastic.
I discovered to my great interest that water that runs at the river in my ward, the Stour, some of it has been transported from the Lincolnshire Wolds and that sort of area, which otherwise would have gone into the wash, and it is in fact extracted from having not going into the wash and sent all the way across the country into the Stour further upstream, and then extracted further downstream around here and put into reservoirs to the south of us in Essex, indeed. Right, I have questions possibly from Councillor Epignon and Councillor Carter. Councillor Epignon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a small point that Councillor Wellham made, which is that he said that the East Suffolk Internal Drainage Board met 3 times a year. In the documentation, it says 4. So I guess we need to just check which is which. And the other thing which I'm concerned about is you mentioned that there's potentially a 30% deficiency in the water needs within East Anglia and Suffolk in the coming period. And I just wondered to what extent we are planning to mitigate that, with especially given the amount of housing that we're under pressure to provide for people, because clearly the more houses we build, the more demand there will be on our water resources.
Absolutely right. And in fact, that addresses the need for this discussion, because on the assumptions that are built in to the case, the requirement for water takes account of the increased demand for housing, the likelihood of such housing, but also increases in agriculture. So it's a strategic approach with this very much in mind. All I can tell you is that the planning for this is so extensive. There must be something like 50 different partners in a water management partnership all the way across the region, which includes everything you can think of, from Cambridge University through local authorities, through environmental groups, the Environmental Agency, you name it, they are probably involved. This is a huge project. And it will be an ongoing project. The water shortage that is anticipated is no joke. It is absolutely real. Councillor Caston, did you wish to comment at all on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that kind of goes into the Suffolk Flood Risk Scrutiny Committee, because in the last meeting we were looking at heat maps and modelling of where we think that need's going to be and by what increase, over the whole of Suffolk. And it's amazing work that they're doing. They're looking at exactly where there's likely to be, your key service centres and key industrial areas. Like, for instance, I should think this, we heard during the local plan debate that certain areas were couldn't have another sort of meat processing plant or something like that because the water wasn't available. And this is all modelling that's done from the Suffolk County Council, the department there. It's very intricate, and there's a huge amount of information available. But yeah, they are doing exactly that, looking into where that demand will be.
Yeah, there's a major cultural shift going on in terms of water management. In the past, we were desperate to try and avoid flooding and trying to get rid of water as fast as possible to stop it flooding. Now we are trying to use it better on the way, to spread it out, to consider, for example, water meadows where the land itself retains the water. We have to look at hard surfaces. There are so many different areas. I think they'll probably feed into a lot of concerns in the future. So instead of pumping water out to sea where it mixes with salt water, we need to retain that water within the land, so that fresh water is as valuable a resource as we have. Does that help you, Councillor Epignon?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it does, because apart from residential accommodation, of course, as Councillor Caston has mentioned, there is the issue of industrial development, and certainly in and around Stowmarket we have, of course, Gateway 14 coming down the pike here, and I guess that will also have some demands. And I guess it's important that sustainability both across energy and water resources is taken into consideration with these developments.
On the water management side, industrial use, in fact, falls a sort of fairly small third place behind domestic and agricultural use in East Anglia. But there's always a possibility that could increase, but it's not likely to increase very greatly. Councillor Carter, you've been very patient.
Yes, unlike me, isn't it? But I just wanted to say I've got a personal interest in this. Would the group allow an observer to attend a meeting, or if not, would it be possible to share minutes?
I'm more than happy to send you any documentation I have, Councillor Carter. I have immense numbers of reports that I think you personally would find very interesting. More than happy to share those. I will make up a list of what's available. Be prepared to do a lot of reading.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
But it is absolutely fascinating stuff.
It'll make a change for me having to read about a talking dog to my daughter. So it'll be
there is that. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we meet in January, June and October. So we have done this year and last year. So it is three times a year. And the other thing, Councillor Epping is quite right about having to sort of hold water back. I think probably about 10 years ago, the Drainage Board would have tried to get the water to the sea as quickly as possible. Now it's absolutely the opposite. So, for instance, in Debenham, the water is being slowed down by a series of measures to make sure it doesn't get down the Deben as quickly as possible, and has a chance to find its way into the aquifer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wellham. I think we've spent a fair amount of time on water, but those two bodies did seem to belong together. What I'd like to do now is move on to the next body on the statutory list of the outside bodies. Councillor Osborne, not our Councillor Osborne, but the other Councillor Osborne, represents Babergh District Council on the Gainsborough House Society. I think that's fairly obvious what that's for. It's to preserve the Gainsborough House as a memorial. I don't know if Councillor Osborne can make any comment on this or wishes to. No, we'll pass them for that. That's a body that has seen quite a bit of attention over the years, and indeed quite a lot of support from Babergh District Council. The Greenways Countryside Project is a JAC. What's a JAC? Anybody elucidate? OK, we'll move on to that. We don't have either Councillor Hardacre or Councillor Norman here. The Haven Gateway Partnership, I notice we have, which has got representation from Councillor Holt, Councillor Ward from BDC and Councillor Brewster from Mid Suffolk. Councillor Brewster, I don't know if you could provide any background on the Haven Gateway Partnership for the members. Hello? Councillor Brewster, can you hear me? At this point, I'm beginning to wonder if anybody can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, that's
Yes,
fine.
Chair, you're here. Let me see.
Yeah,
I
I can hear you.
Councillor
I can hear you
Brewster,
too.
you're
That's okay. Was this? I heard crickets.
Yes. Sorry,
Councillor
Councillor McCraw. I've forgotten I was muted.
We've all done that. Anyway, Councillor Brewster, the Haven Gateway Partnership, and I have to confess I have a personal interest because my ward is literally lies on the Haven Gateway. At least I think it does.
It probably does, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, obviously, it is a cross-border organisation, which certainly in the past has proved very, very useful. Haven Gateway Partnership has gone through quite a sticky time, I have to say, and trying to sort of reinvent themselves to do more. Having said that, I have got some concerns. Recently, it has seemed more Essex-centric than Suffolk, although obviously East Suffolk and Babergh are part of it. Obviously, it's very important for East Suffolk because of the Port of Felixstowe, which is also has membership. I think certainly Babergh could have some benefit out of it. I'm really quite unsure of the benefits at the moment, anyway, that Mid Suffolk are getting out of it. And I have, over the last 2 months, asked Fiona Duhamel to speak to the director there just to see what they are progressing for any work in Mid Suffolk, certainly. And obviously Babergh as well come to that. Although obviously, as you said, you sit almost on the border of it.
Well, I have a specific reason, Councillor Brewster, which I'll come to later in questions. But I mean, do you obviously have some doubts then about the value of it as far as Mid Suffolk goes? And I have some questions from the Babergh point of view.
Okay. I'll try and answer the Babergh ones.
Well,
if I can.
I'm not sure you'll be able to, but I mean, my experience with the Haven Gateway Partnership has literally been by hearing its name. When a matter concerning a particularly awkward railroad crossing at Manningtree Station, which of course is the last rail and road crossing point between Suffolk and Essex. It's a notorious bottleneck, not to say a potentially dangerous one. It's been the subject of debate for 30 or 40 years or so, particularly with increases in road and rail traffic. At a big summit involving all the MPs of the body's Department of Transport, the job was handed over to the Haven Gateway Partnership to carry out a viability assessment for finding the funding to have a study on looking at the Manningtree crossing, which is basically like kicking it so far into the long grass that it will never be found again. I've heard nothing since. That was 3 years ago, possibly 4. And I have to say, I question what benefit the council is getting from the Haven Gateway Partnership, and if they regard us as being an essential part of their operation. I think that is something that deserves discussion. And so do you, I suspect.
Yes, that is one of my worries. I think they are looking for councils to rejoin them. East Suffolk did leave at one point. They've now gone back. So I suppose they are certainly getting something out of it. The area you're talking about, certainly I've heard them speak about it, but that was a while back, and it does seem to have quietened, I think. But
I noticed, Councillor Brewster, the appointments are made and involve cabinet members. Which seems appropriate because it's obviously a strategic matter dealt with at cabinet level. And I wonder if that is something perhaps that any cabinet member could be taken back to the joint cabinet to discuss. But I personally would say, from your evidence and from my own thoughts, unless anybody else has any thoughts or experience or has even heard of the Haven Gateway Partnership, that perhaps that might be the route to examine that case.
I think it might well, and this is partly the reason I am going through the AD at the moment, because I think she also has a few concerns, perhaps not as many as I do, but obviously it's costing us money, and I'm not absolutely certain in my mind that money is being spent as well as it could be.
Okay, can we make a side note then? If I can ask the governance officer to make a side note that the Haven Gateway Partnership is something that we might want to include in a recommendation. Obviously that will be for members to decide, but can we just make a side note and come back to that later? Is that okay, Henriette?
Yes, Chair, no problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster. I don't want to keep on everything for too long because there's a lot to get through here. Home Start Mid Suffolk. This is entirely a Mid Suffolk group. Representative there being Councillor Haddingham, who's not present. so we don't have a witness for that. Ipswich and District Citizens Advice Bureau. Now, Citizens Advice Bureaus, both the Stowmarket, Ipswich and Sudbury operations, have been the subject of scrutiny by this committee in regard of value and funding in the previous years, and in fact we will be continuing that in this council year. So we have a number of people who have experience on Citizens Advice Bureau, and it appears there are some slight differences between the approach taken in the two councils. Now, Councillor Hurren, who's the representative on the Ipswich CAB, isn't present, but I do know we have some voluntary representatives here who are not representing Babergh District Council, but representing themselves and operating as perhaps trustees. I wonder if anybody would like to address Citizens Advice Bureaus in general rather than in particular. Councillor Muller, I see Councillor Carter's hand is still up. Is that from before, Councillor Carter?
No, this was regards both for CAB and Home Start because.
Oh, fine. Well, let's go back to Home Start, Councillor Carter, because I did rather brush over that.
As actually I have not appointed to it, but I have had personal benefits from it. I can say from feeding back from the in following the minutes of the meetings that have been scheduled, there have been quite. It has, to me at least, seemed to be quite beneficial for the council to have this feedback on. This is actually Home Start Mid and West Suffolk. So if there were to be any appointments from Babergh Council onto it, I would think it would be quite beneficial, especially as we are a sort of joint council. It would be beneficial to have a representation from both Mid Suffolk and from Babergh, possibly.
Okay, can we make a note of that, Henriette, just as a possibility? Anybody else want to discuss Home Start before we move back to CAB? Thank you, Councillor Carter. Right, Councillor Muller, then Councillor Maybury. Councillor Muller.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've actually been a trustee on the Mid Suffolk CAB since 2015. We meet on a fairly regular basis, and in fact, we've got our AGM, this year's AGM, tomorrow virtually. It's a very good group. We obviously discuss the funding, which we get obviously from Mid Suffolk District Council. We get funding from Suffolk County Council and various other funders throughout the district. They're a very, very busy organisation in Mid Suffolk, especially latterly with all the various issues around COVID and problems with people have with bills, etc. They've continued to work throughout the period, doing a sterling job. And it's actually just nice to be a part of that, to report back what an excellent job all the volunteers and the paid staff actually do. I don't know whether members are aware, but Carol Eagles, who was the chief officer at Mid Suffolk, she's now moved to take over at West Suffolk, and Simon Clifton is now deputising in that role for at least a year as the chief officer of the Mid Suffolk CAB. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Miller, thank you very much. Councillor Maybury.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think I need to declare that I'm actually a director of Sudbury Citizens Advice. And if you do not wish me to speak, then that's absolutely fine.
It would be a non-pecuniary interest, presumably, so I don't think there's any conflict.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I just point out that they have actually changed their name. They are now Citizens Advice. The Bureau was dropped a few years ago. It's just Citizens Advice. I know it's so easy to refer back to it. The Citizens Advice in Sudbury, they run a terrific programme for debt advice, which is one of our biggest items, and that covers all manner of items from tenancy, rent arrears to any debt with any credit card provider. Many items are covered by that.
Yeah, I think
they all work extremely hard. I think representation on it is really useful. However, and I know somebody who is there will make a comment, I really do not think it's helpful when there is a husband and wife team together on one board, whether it's for representing Babergh or whether it's representing themselves personally.
Okay, I think that's a moot point.
There will be a conflict of interest, even if two people say they are completely separate. I say this with some experience. My son used to be a district councillor and I refused to sit on any subcommittee that he was on because I didn't think it was correct. And that is the way we should go.
Well, I think everybody makes their own personal choices in these matters. But I think we're really discussing the matter of citizens' advice, and I will now call it CA, as a principle and as a matter of representation. Councillor Wellham has a point here. Councillor Wellham?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When we started talking about citizens' advice, we noted that in Mid-Suffolk, we have no observer at the Mid-Suffolk citizens' advice, whereas in Babergh, there are representatives as observers at 2 of the citizens' advice centres. So I wondered why this was. And I believe historically, the districts have appointed either appointed trustees or appointed board members who have taken an active role, but that stopped because there was a potential of a conflict of interest in that you might have a district councillor as a board member voting for or against or pushing for a grant from the district council. So I can understand why the districts don't appoint trustees. What I couldn't understand was why Mid-Suffolk don't have an observer, and I felt it would be advantageous to have an observer, and I think from what I've heard so far, it would be advantageous for Mid-Suffolk to have an observer at Mid-Suffolk. Councillor Muller, I'm sure, does a sterling job there, but he is there in his own right, so he has no remit to report back to the district in any way, shape or form. I raised this with the leader, and the response from the leader was that she didn't wish there to be an observer at the Mid-Suffolk citizens' advice, and the reason she gave was that BMC, our officers meet regularly with officers of Mid-Suffolk citizens' advice, but I felt, and I still feel, that that's not quite the same as having an observer. An observer could get a feel for the direction that the CA is going in and what potentially needs there might be, and can report that back to other members, or there could be a more formal report back.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. I mean, I think it's fairly clear there is a difference in opinion between the 2 different councils, and that's fair enough. We are sovereign councils. Each council and each cabinet is entitled to take its own viewpoint, but obviously we're also all councillors. I have to say, from a personal point of view, I've always been grateful for the fact that, as well as officer involvement, we have member involvement. The fact that we contribute money to the CAs, I don't think is either here nor there. Were anybody to feel there was a potential conflict of interest, they could quite simply declare it as a non-pecuniary interest, but decline to vote. But I don't see they should be able to be declined from being involved. I don't think it does any harm. Councillor Carter, did you wish to come back on citizens' advice?
Yes, I was going to make the same point as Councillor Wellham. I did have a quick question as well. Should I declare, as I have been a I have been a client of the citizens' advice in the past. And
I don't think it's necessary, Councillor Carter. It's a private matter, and the whole point of citizens' advice is that it provides confidential and dispassionate, rational information for members of the public who require that information. And want to be able to deal with somebody who has no axe to grind whatsoever, and that can only be useful. And we've seen the value of CA, particularly through the pandemic, and we're likely to see it after the pandemic and in the aftermath in the years to come. I think, if anything, CA's value has been re-demonstrated to possibly to the highest level any of us thought imaginable. We have three hands. Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, it certainly has. I wanted to have a query as well regarding with Mid Suffolk having an observation, but Babergh having an observer on both the West Suffolk CA citizens advice and on the Ipswich. I did wonder.
We have Sudbury and Ipswich.
Oh, Sudbury.
Yeah, because those are separate. We contribute to both, mostly though to the Sudbury one.
I just wanted to know some feedback on the benefit of being on two different ones. Whether or not do we get any feedback on clients that would go to Ipswich rather than Sudbury? Possibly would they go to Mid Suffolk?
They tend to have different client bases. I would say the west of the Babergh district would go to Sudbury, whereas in my neck of the woods and the Shotley Peninsula, and they would more likely go to Ipswich. At least that was the case before lockdown. Now, of course, the vast majority of CA's work has been done by phone and virtually.
Certainly. I just wondered if the benefit would be to advise Mid Suffolk to have an observer both on the Mid Suffolk one and Ipswich, or just settle just for Mid Suffolk.
OK, that's a very good point. I think that particular recommendation would have to be coming from the Mid Suffolk members. It would be inappropriate for the Babergh members to be making such a recommendation to Mid Suffolk. But I think we can mark that one down as something to return to in recommendations. Should the Mid Suffolk members wish to make a recommendation to their cabinet to re-investigate the possibility of such an observer. Would that be the best way of approaching it, Councillor Carter, Councillor Wellham?
Would be my bet.
Yes, Chair. But could I ask one of the officers a question? My understanding is that it is the leader who does the appointing, and it's more or less ratified or noted by council. So it isn't council who decide who to appoint and what to appoint to. It is in the gift of the leader. But I just could do with having that clarified, if I may, please.
Jan or Henriette, are you able to?
Yes, I can respond to that, Chair. That is absolutely correct. It is the leader who, what should we say, determines or negotiate who will be representing on outside bodies, and she negotiate this with the group leaders, as far as I'm aware. Jan, can you?
So just to clarify that, so all outside bodies are appointed by council. That is most definitely a council function, but obviously when you have an administration, it's the leader who indicates what positions she may wish to take up, and therefore would make those recommendations to council, and any that they don't wish to take up would then obviously fall to the parties not in the administration. I think this is customer practice with the CAB. It's something that they decided a while ago not to have an observer or representative on there, and it was because of the conflict, because we do fund them quite a lot of money, and it was felt that councillors in their own right, not through a council appointment, could sit on there as a board member or an observer if they so wished.
I have to say, Jan, from my own point of view, I'd have thought if you're giving somebody some money, you're entitled to have a little say in the direction that money is spent in. But if Mid Suffolk members, we would be correct though if we wish to make a recommendation, or the Mid Suffolk members wish to make such a recommendation, in making it to the cabinet.
I think your recommendation would go to council.
To council.
Yeah.
In that case,
council would obviously vote on it, and
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if we can pencil that in as a potential recommendation, we can come back to that later.
Okay.
Are members happy with that? I see two hands still raised. I don't know if they're from before.
Well, it was. I just kept my hand up in case I wanted to come back. But no, I'm happy with that. Thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Right, the next item on this list.
Chairman.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Mabry, I apologise.
No, thank you. I'd take my hand down and put it back up again. I think an observer on citizens' advice is a really good idea. They do not have any voting rights at all, but at least they can view what is happening at the citizens' advice centre. And as I have already said, one of the biggest issues is debt advice, and there is a huge percentage of debt advice which is given to Babergh tenants. And I really do think that the District Council should acknowledge this and be aware that it is vitally important that they recognise how much citizens' advice are actually giving to Babergh tenants apart from rental arrears, council tax arrears, all manner of arrears.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mabry.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we can pencil that one in. The Ipswich Strategic Planning Area Board also appears to be a cabinet function because it's a strategic matter. I don't think we have anybody present here who can add anything to that. The next one, though, I do think is something that matters to some of us anyway, which probably mostly concerns Babergh District Council, is the joint advisory committee and partnership with Dedham Vale and the Suffolk Coast and Heaths AONBs. Currently, the representatives are councillors Nunn and Davis, but I have had prior experience on the AONB for, surprisingly enough, Dedham Vale. My ward actually has a foot in both of these AONBs. We're possibly one of the few wards in the country that actually has a foothold in not one but two separate AONBs. And I can say from my brief experience, because as I say, I'm at the edge of the Dedham Vale area, absolutely fascinating stuff, directly involved in the point of view from the council. Obviously, it affects our environment, it affects our standard of living, how we feel about our place, and obviously there is a considerable planning implication, all the more so as we face more planning pressures. I did see a hand up briefly from Councillor Gould. Was that on this subject, Councillor Gould?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, no, I don't think I've got my hand up. Is it still up?
No, it must have been a glitch I thought I saw for a moment. My apologies. But all I would say is that the representation on the AONBs is something that I personally would regard as vital. And as I say, any of us who live near or adjacent or in an AONB would be very appreciative of that. Any questions on that subject? No? In that case, we'll move on. Local Government Association, again, this is a leader function, and I don't think there's anything we can comment upon that. These are statutory requirements. There's two things, there's something called sparse and something called assembly. I assume that they're different aspects of the same thing. The Museum of East Anglian Life. Now, this is based, I think, in Stowmarket. I don't know if any Stowmarket area members wish to comment upon that particular outside body. Nope, fine, we'll move straight on then to Pinmill Bay Management. This is on the Shotley Peninsula, Pinmill on the Orwell, also with an AONB. This is a multi-agency or multi-group number of stakeholders involving the Ipswich Harbour Board, various environmental bodies, and of course the people of Chelmerdiston and Pinmill. Councillor Hurren isn't here, but I know he's been on that for some time. Councillor Gould, this is in your ward. Is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation? Councillor Gould, your hand is up. Okay, Councillor Eppingham, I believe you might have wanted to say something on the Museum of East Anglian Life. My apologies for skipping over you.
Thank you, Chairman. All I was going to really say, this is an important piece of green real estate within the town of Stowmarket. And, you know, we've just talked about areas of outstanding natural beauty. And from my point of view, this is a very important area of outstanding natural beauty within an urban setting. And I think, you know, we must not underestimate the value that it plays in the well-being of our town, and therefore deserve the support that it gets.
Yep, I can remember taking my children there many years ago, and I look forward to taking my grandchildren there at some point in the future. That's fantastic. I think we've covered as much as we can on that without having direct representation. The Key Theatre Sudbury is represented from Babergh, Councillor Stephen Plum. Monthly board meetings, that's quite a substantial amount, although I shouldn't imagine they're meeting much at the moment. Suffolk Coastal Forum, we've already mentioned Sudbury and District Citizens Advice. Councillor Osborne, I believe you are appointed on that. That's the Sudbury version of CA. Is there anything we should add to that?
Chair, I think Councillor Ayres has her hand up.
Councillor Ayres, my apologies, I missed it.
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, it's back to the Key Theatre.
Oh, thank you.
I represent it for the Town Council.
Ah.
And in fact, we have been meeting nearly weekly via Zoom because of the problems. And they have been doing as much as they can, doing lots of other activities. People can go online. So we're meeting far more than we would normally.
I apologise for misrepresenting the situation.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Councillor Osborne, I just briefly touched on the Sudbury Citizens Advice, although I don't suppose it's any different from our discussions already. Is that correct? Okay, can't hear there.
Mr. Chairman, I just make a few comments about, as I say, observer on the outside bodies. The CAB in Sudbury, since the meeting forum of I think it was 2018, they're excellent. You know, they found it an excellent area, and the funding was very much appreciated from the outcome of that meeting. The Advice Centre, I think, is very much thankful for all the funding of Babergh and the Sudbury Town Council, and they do find their own fundraising due to the excellent chief exec over the years in charge of, and of course the treasurers involved. Over the times, I've been appointed as a member of as an observer for the council. The times have changed with other committees. The times have meant that I possibly couldn't attend as many meetings as that because it clashed, to say, with the other committees that I've been appointed to. Therefore, a lot of meetings I've been able to attend, but when I do there, I find that the advice that they've given out and the officers there are excellent. The Advice Centre has had changes to staff and volunteers in the running of the centre, and although they're taking due to them taking full retirement, I suspect, these have been excellent volunteers for the issues that have had been in the professional capacities that they've had. Also, they've kept the trustees level high by bringing in some excellent new trustees. There has been a huge demand for advice in all these areas of concerns for our residents, and therefore their budget, their yearly budget, is well managed to keep the centre running with their full-time employees and the centre itself. Excellent advice manager and staff, and give full commitments and to their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Osborne. There are no questions for that from anybody. Councillor Ayres.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
It's all right. Sorry. We've all done it. Suffolk Coastal Forum, Councillor Davis isn't present, and again we're coming back to aspects of water, so we think we've covered enough water today. The Suffolk Health and Wellbeing Board, Babergh have representation from Councillors Davis and Gould, when Councillor Gould is with us today. Councillor Gould, can you add anything to coverage of the Suffolk Health and Wellbeing Board?
No, I think due to Councillor Davis' regular attendance, I haven't actually attended any of them, and I don't get any papers, so there's nothing useful I can add. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I mean, you're a substitute, I take it, on that committee.
I am indeed, yes.
Okay, thanks, great. We'll move on then. The Suffolk Health Scrutiny Committee, Councillor McLaren is a Babergh representative, and Councillor Ayres possibly as a substitute. Would either of you like to comment on the Suffolk Health Scrutiny Committee?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would actually. I think this demonstrates really good interagency working. The Suffolk Health Scrutiny is managed, really directed from the County Council. Our chairman is Jessica Fleming, but every district in Suffolk is on that committee. We meet quarterly, but we usually have 5-6 hour meetings, so we do go through a very heavy agenda each time. We link with the counties of Norfolk and Essex quite regularly. We've spawned quite a few subcommittees, and we're in touch with all the health providers that within Suffolk, within Norfolk and within Essex. It is a very busy committee. I find it very stimulating. Obviously, I come out of a health background. I think it's brilliant, and I feel it's very useful. The only comment I would make, looking at the principles of reporting, I have never, ever reported on that committee to the rest of my colleagues, and that was one of the questions I was going to raise later on in the meeting.
Well, I think this is actually a perfect point to do so, because I've felt this myself, in that a lot of us attend these bodies and we gain a lot of information, and I hope we are serving the bodies by our own efforts, but the direct feedback that we give to our own council, either Babergh or Mid Suffolk, doesn't seem to me to be very apparent. And I'm wondering if a recommendation is a possibility to there being some form of reporting mechanism. And I don't mean a lengthy one, but just to say these are the subjects we've discussed, and to be able to feed them directly back either to the council or to the cabinet, at least as a matter of just providing an information trail. Does that more or less, is that along the lines you're thinking, Councillor McLaren?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had a list of things that I thought ought to be considered for discussion, but really in the 15 months that I've been a councillor, most of that spent inside latterly, I have never ever seen a report from any other member about the committees they attend, and I think it's so important that we keep everybody up to date.
That's a huge area of great importance, and particularly at the moment where we are seeing not just the obvious COVID-19 health effects, but the subsidiary effects of the knock-on throughout the rest of the health service.
Can I just say that we are very strict. As you know, I'm on quite a few scrutiny committees, and scrutiny is one of my past skills. And I've got to say the Health Scrutiny Committee does put the health service and health service providers through strict questioning, and and we've seen the benefit of that. We are also involved with the development of the Ipswich buildings, or the Colchester, the Colchester Hospital buildings. I have just been selected to go on the planning committee for the new West Suffolk Hospital, and so we have a wide range of interest. Thank you, Chair.
This, of course, is a Suffolk County Council committee,
yes.
And it's a separate scrutiny committee to the Scrutiny Committee.
Yes.
So it is a full committee of Suffolk County Council. So it's a cross authority Scrutiny Committee, which is something that this committee itself have experimented in the past. So I thoroughly agree with the idea. Councillor Mabry, did you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really a comment because having previous experience on both the House Scrutiny and the Health and Wellbeing Board, Councillor McLaren is absolutely right. They are both very, very important, and with the Health Scrutiny, yes, they do put some of the health providers through very strict questioning. I have seen it myself. I think what is really important about both of those boards is that it's two-way communication. So we may be asking questions, but then they also come back to us with questions. And I think that is really, really important. As to the reporting, I quite agree. There should be some type of reporting. I was always informed by the communities of the community officers that it would be picked up at the end of year or quarterly report. It was, but there is nothing to stop a proper report. Councillor McLaren said it was for all the district councils. That is absolutely true. For Health Scrutiny in particular, it does include Ipswich Town. And I do remember having some very interesting conversations with those representatives from Ipswich Town on the Health Scrutiny Board. I think what we should remember is that those two boards also feed down to other subcommittees, and it's now not there, but there was also a child health board that I sat on, which was very, very interesting. The times of when I had my children as to what is happening these days with parents and children is so different. There's just a great big divide in many respects, and it was the greatest sorrow to me when the local house trusts closed the centres for children. I think that was a real shame because they did actually bring a lot of vital advice and help to a lot of parents. Now, whether or not this is going to be taken on more by Home Start, I do not know. I'm not privy to that information, but there does need to be something for child health.
At the moment, Councillor Mabry, I think we're just dealing with the existing bodies without revisiting old ones or reviving old ones. But I take your point that this is something that should be looked at somewhere. Can I ask Councillor McLaren a question? I presume that there's considerable involvement with the CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups.
Yeah, just as our overview and scrutiny has a very heavy programme, there is a regular, I mean, I'm receiving updates from all the CCGs at the moment regarding the COVID-19 action, and we, our Teresa Harding, who is our supporting administrator, I mean, I get regularly every week information about what's happening across Suffolk, be that to do with development, COVID, new ideas. And of course, we do have trusts that come, especially in Norfolk with mental health, that they regularly come under scrutiny from our committee.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Henriette, can we make a note then that a potential recommendation that raised as a point by Councillor McLaren and reinforced by Councillor Mabry and myself, that some form of reporting structure from the outside bodies back to the council should be considered to provide not only value but evidence of that value to the council and to the public. These groups we operate on, and I think for the vast majority of the public, they have no knowledge unless they pay attention to our annual meeting where these appointments are made. And the next time anything is heard of them is the next year that those appointments are made. And it seems to me that there's an information deficit there, and I believe that should be addressed. So can we make a point that that's a potential recommendation?
Certainly, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I note that I have nearly reached the end of this, but there are a couple. And the next one is the Suffolk Police and Crime Panel, and Councillor Wellham is the Mid-Suffolk representative on that. Councillor Wellham, is there anything you can tell us about the Suffolk Police and Crime Panel?
I will try. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we meet 4 times a year. We have meetings, panel meetings 4 times a year. We have workshops 4 times a year. And we are also invited to observe the Accountability and Performance Panel. So at the Accountancy and Performance Panel meetings, the PCC, that's Tim, challenges the Chief Constable. And then at our panel meetings, we challenge the PCC.
So when you say challenge, that sounds rather like they get into a ring against each other.
Well, not quite. No, we challenge the decisions. We scrutinise.
Thank you.
Although I think Tim likes to use the word challenge.
Right.
So we scrutinise the decisions of the PCC, the work programme, the budget, and the council tax to be levied. And we have a sort of a veto if the council tax to be levied is not to our liking. We have a sort of a veto, but we're only allowed to veto it once each year. So it could come back with an almost identical budget, which we would not be able to veto. But we've not got to that stage. It's usually been by discussion, and the budget has been pretty much as we would have expected it to be. We cover a huge range of topics, anything to do with policing and PCSOs, and in particular, the call centre performance has been high on the agenda. The time to answer the telephone and the value of the response and so on. The deployment of officers, not the day-to-day deployment of officers, but the strategic deployment of officers. And in my case, it's to try to get adequate resources into the rural areas and into Stowmarket town centre, because there tends to be a lot of activity, a lot of police resources given to, let's say, Bury St Edmunds, Ipswich, Lowestoft and so on, and we could be not getting our fair share. We get a whole load of reports, information bulletins, the Accountability and Performance Panel reports, and also there are public meetings which we are, well, not just recently, but other public meetings we have been invited to attend. 1 or 2 of those have gone online, but they tended to be public meetings in the towns around Suffolk. I've been particularly interested in police engagement in rural areas, and the use of speed indicator devices in parishes, because there could be a good system around the villages of providing information to the police. Also concerns about policing the nighttime economy, and additionally, who's supervising, who provides the sort of programme of work for the PCSOs who are funded by Mid-Suffolk. Because what we want to try to make sure is that they don't just get drawn off somewhere completely different, and we want them to be looking at our district council's priorities. And as an aside, I'm about to attend the National Annual Conference for PCC panels.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Large portions of that I was completely unaware of, particularly the matter about the veto, which is fascinating. Any questions, members, for Councillor Wellham on the Police and Crime Panel? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Keith, how does this fit in with local police forums? I attend the Babergh local police forum. We haven't met, obviously, because of the pandemic, but how does that committee feed down to these local groups? And the other thing is that is not listed on our list of outside bodies, but I think it's important for me as a local councillor to be at that meeting. Thank you.
Well, I think in that instance, I mean, are you referring to the meeting that you attend already, or are you referring to the police and crime panel, Councillor?
Well, I just wondered whether it links into the local police.
I'm not sure that they're not doing different functions. One being on local policing and one being on a strategic approach.
Okay.
Perhaps you and Councillor Wellham can have a discussion with that outside, and then. But I think the basic answer would be, let me see. I think our representative of Babergh is Councillor Beer, so
Correct.
you would need to have a conversation perhaps with Councillor Beer to see whether the two do link in any way.
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions, members? Well, thank you very much. That's one, as I say.
Sorry, I was just going to add to what's been said about local policing. Obviously, the police and crime panel is working at a strategic level, but part of that is to ensure that there is proper community engagement in the various local areas, but that is done through our scrutinising the Police and Crime Commissioner about the way that work is done through the community engagement officers, of which there used to be one in every SNT. I'm not sure that there still is, but there are a number of what they call community engagement officers around the county.
So it's a scrutiny function as well as a panel.
It is a scrutiny function entirely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fine. It's just calling it a panel is obvious. I mean, a panel can mean so many different things, and who can say? Councillor Muller, I think you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just in response to Councillor Wellham's point about the community engagement officers. I can confirm that PC Stefan Henriksson is still the police engagement officer for Mid Suffolk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's put that to aside for the moment. I don't see any possible recommendation coming out of that discussion, but we now move to the Suffolk Violence and Abuse Partnership. And Councillor McLaren, I think you're the Babergh representative upon this. It's described as an informal partnership, but I wonder if you could throw any light on the subject.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It basically is a meeting of all the agencies that deal with violence and domestic abuse. It is very informal. There is no record, I think, of those that attend. Because I have an interest in domestic abuse and safeguarding, it's therefore been of interest to me. I can't say that I contribute very much to the discussion at a meeting, because it's usually a discussion of those agencies that are directly involved. Many of them know each other in sort of their professional life, but I'm very happy to sit there and observe. And again, we're back to the reporting. It would be worth me reporting on that meeting to members.
Of course, it does occur to me now I think about it that both of these last two subjects to some extent feed into the West of Suffolk Community Safety Partnership, which we receive a report from every year to examine a variety of aspects involved in community safety, and obviously policing and violence against men, women and girls has come up every year. We've looked at that. So they join together.
Yeah, but Chair, you will see I'm a member of that as well.
I know. We're coming on to that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say.
You're very busy, Councillor. You're very busy, Councillor McLaren.
Shall we? Do you want me to bring that up later then?
We'll come back to the WSCSP in a minute, I think, because the next one I have is the Suffolk Waste Partnership. Councillors Fleming and Arthey. Councillor Arthey, I know, has been involved since the setting up of the Waste Partnership. Neither are present, but I have to say, on observation, it has been operating successfully across the county for some time, although there obviously are still considerable challenges in the future. Now, we would come to the West Suffolk Community Safety Partnership, something that always confuses people. how we over here in Babergh, stretching all the way to the outskirts of Ipswich, can be considered the west of Suffolk, but there it is. The east of Suffolk is Ipswich and points east. West of Suffolk appears to be the rest of us. Now, I think we have representation there again from Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Now, this is one of the issues that I was going to bring up. In my experience, since I was nominated to it, I've only been able to attend one meeting because it conflicts with one of my major committees within Babergh District Council. And I did speak to the leader, and I assumed that he'd made some changes to that representation by myself, because it's vital that we actually attend that meeting. But when I looked at the list, I saw that it was still as it was previously. So I must take that up with John Ward again.
Yeah, it's a scheduling thing, and I think it does come down to these problems. I mean, I have to say, Councillor McLaren, with the number of bodies outside and inside you're serving on, I'm amazed you have time for anything else.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, welcome. I'm just genuinely stunned.
Oh, dear.
Okay. Fortunately, we do have a pretty clear idea of the role of the WSCSP, because we carry out an annual statutory review, and that will be taking place in the new year. So I propose to move on from there if members have no problems. Are no questions on that subject, are there? Okay. So we looked through that report, and I'm very grateful to the officer who prepared it, because I personally found it very useful to have those paragraphs and the explanation rather than a tabular form. I must admit, tables can be tricky. Now we come to the table, and quite a complicated table in my view, but Jan Robinson did refer to it earlier, and I think this one is the one we should probably focus upon, rather than just the list of the appointments to both councils. Before we do that, however, I note there may be members who serve on outside bodies that have not yet had a chance to speak. So I'd like to go round the group in turn and ask any member of serving on an outside body that has not had a chance to speak or heard that body spoken about, if they'd like to contribute now. If you could raise your hands, I'd be very grateful. Yes, Councillor Osborne. This is Jan Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, apologies. I've had problems with my laptop, so I've only just been able to get in. I sit on the Gainsborough House outside body group, and I think it's really key. Obviously, Babergh have invested very heavily into Gainsborough House, and rightly so. It's a fantastic project, as well as putting SIL money into the project as well. So it's important that we remain on the outside body so that we can sit there and not challenge them, but monitor the progress of the project, and also be a watchful eye on how it moves forward during the project, during construction, and indeed after construction. So I think it's important that we stay on there. We normally meet every 3 months, but we haven't met. I was just going to chase Mark up, actually. There hasn't been a meeting for quite a few months, in fact, before lockdown. So I'm just doing an email now. You've reminded me to ask him for an update on where we are, etc. We've got no reporting mechanism for me to report back to other members at Babergh, so perhaps that's something that we could look into at some point to see how that can be achieved away from a full council meeting, because otherwise you'd have too many reports back and it would take too long.
I think it's something we may well include in our recommendations, Councillor Osborne, and I think it's important, you know, with a variety of different purposes behind the outside bodies. Some are environmental, some are more matters of strategic business, some must be considered to be cultural, and they're all important functions of a council. Councillor Carter, you had a point or a group to raise?
Yes, just regarding, I do serve, prior to being a councillor, I've been serving on the Mid-Suffolk Disability Forum and the Disability Forums. Is
that an appointment of the councils, though?
No, it's not, but we have approached the council before with asking for a representation, and we've had various officers saying it would be raised yet we've heard nothing back. So if we could make a recommendation that the Disability Forum has been requesting.
I'm not certain that falls within our remit. The remit of this committee is to scrutinise the existing state, but we can certainly suggest that I don't know how to phrase this. Perhaps it would be best to say that we could examine other potential outside bodies for the future on the same basis as the ones we already have. Would that suffice?
I'd be happy with that. Yeah. My apologies. Thank you.
I just don't want to make things more complicated than they already are. This subject is a broad one, and I don't think we've already established it doesn't receive much attention. Overcomplicating the issue might be putting too much on our plate and on the plate of our cabinets. Councillor Ayres. Councillor Robinson, sorry, Jan Robinson, I think you have something to say there. Jan?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with the Disability Forum, we do have officer representation on there. So our officers do a lot of work with the forum. Obviously, if you still wanted to recommend looking at whether you wanted a councillor appointment, but we do have officer representation and we do work quite closely with that forum.
It's coming back to that question of the different approaches on citizens' advice, whereas officers have representation and councillors don't. The question is whether councillors wish to have representation. I think it's a subject worthy of discussion. Can we mark a note on that, Henriette, that's a potential recommendation? Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to commend Jan, actually, because I live next door to the new build of Gainsborough's house. And so it's been quite interesting, to say the least. But Jan's actually been to all the neighbours and kept a very close eye on it as our representative. And thank you, Jan, because she really has kept a tight hold on what was happening with, you know, all the heavy lorries. We had cement lorries lined up, but Jan really has been and negotiated with the builders, and it's been brilliant. So thank you, Jan.
Yes, thank you very much for that point, Councillor Ayres. Jan Robinson, your hand is still raised. Is there something you wish to point out? No, fine. OK, we'll move on. That brings us to the end of that list. And anybody else wish to add any further groups that they think should be brought to the committee's attention? All right, at this point then, I think we have this lengthy, detailed table running from pages 39 through to 45, looking at a variety of groups. And I believe this is the point where, Jan, you said that some groups felt that we no longer required representation. I noticed the Suffolk Joint Emergency Planning Policy panel has got crossings out in it. I wondered, Jan, if I could ask you to take us through that list and highlight those groups that believe that Babergh and Mid Suffolk Council's representation is no longer required. Would that be helpful?
Chair, I will just run through. I'll try and remember everything, but if not, I might have to ask Henriette.
Well, I've got the list in front of me.
Yeah. So
on the papers.
So I've got where it's in red. We're being asked to say that we no longer require representation, and actually, Babergh Domestic Violence and Abuse Forum, Compassion, as it's known as. I think their terms of reference have changed, and they no longer need a councillor representative. I think it's more like they have user groups with that now, which they find they use their expertise and don't require a councillor representation. That was their response anyway.
So this is the list, if I'm correct, then it's on the pages 31 to 37.
Yes.
Right.
No, well, yeah, it's called Appointments of Representatives to Outside Bodies, and it's got in red, no longer require.
So let's look at each of those in turn.
Yeah.
So the first one is the Babergh Domestic Violence and Abuse Forum, Compassion.
Yeah.
Currently, Councillor McLaren representing on that.
Yeah, and that's the one where we've written to them, and they've said that actually they've had a change in their terms of reference and no longer require councillor representation. It's more of an inward group where they're actually talking with people who represent other groups from domestic violence, and so there's no longer a need for councillors to be on there.
Okay, well, Councillor McLaren, you're the representative. Do you have any comment upon that?
Yes, Chair. In fact, some of these abuse groups I inherited from another councillor. So I've never had the opportunity to attend any of their meetings.
So it may be that it's actually redundant in that sense.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
Councillor Mabry, did you have a point you wished to raise?
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with what Jan Robinson has just said. During my term as the representative for Sudbury Domestic Abuse, they suddenly became very sort of few and far between in meetings, and when I contacted them, there was very little information to hand. And I remember attending one meeting, and it was all to do with the smaller groups, as Jan is saying. So I would suggest that is the correct way to go forward. Thank you.
So can we add that as a potential recommendation that from Babergh, the Domestic Abuse Forum be removed? Next one, I'm going through Babergh and then Mid-Suffolk. My apologies if it's the way the order they come in. The East-West Rail Consortium. Councillor Holt isn't here, but I believe that this was dealing with moving railway trains from the east to the west and vice versa.
Yeah. So
the line to Peterborough.
Yes, it is, and we have appointed to it, but actually when we spoke to them, they require a subscription for us to join, and there was some discussion around why we would want to pay a subscription if we didn't feel that we were getting any value out of it. So although we're appointed, we haven't paid the subscription, so that's how it stands. So really,
I think we're accepting that when it comes to the rail industry, that we are the last people to be considered. Having been a rail user for many years, including that Peterborough line, I even commuted on it once. I can testify that nobody cares what anybody thinks. Sorry, that was a bit harsh, but it's the rail industry. Okay. So that one we can mark down as something that we can recommend that should be, removed from the list.
Yeah.
The Joint Waste Management Board.
So this
I'm somewhat confused by.
So this is not the same as the Joint Waste Partnership Board. So it's a duplication, in fact. Right. So Joint Waste Management Board no longer meets, so hence why it's been superseded now. So, we can get rid of that. Removed. Yes.
Okay, another recommendation then. Suffolk, we can do this all in one total recommendation, Henriette, if that's okay.
Yes,
just
Chair.
A list of them for each council. Suffolk Joint Emergency Planning Policy Panel, Councillor Ayres and Councillor Carpendale currently representing.
Yeah, Chair. Again, this is another panel that hasn't met, so hasn't met for a number of years, and only really tends to meet if there is something like a massive flood, or you'd think of COVID, but 19 pandemic. But as it hasn't met in the pandemic, I'm not sure it's ever going to meet. So it's one that hasn't met for a couple of years. So I think we can get.
Yep, so add that to the list. Suffolk Rail Policy Group. I'm the representative on this one. I was appointed some 5.5 years ago. It likewise has never met, and I did query it for the first 3 years and discovered, I'm glad to say, that the only time that the Suffolk Rail Policy Group would ever be expected to meet would be in the event of a rail disaster or accident. So you don't want it to meet in that instance. So I don't know whether that condition still applies, but it's never met in the 5.5 years. Thank goodness, perhaps.
Yeah, so Chair, that's another one that hasn't met and is no longer going to meet. I think it's been superseded. Is that right, Henriette?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Jan and Chair. I actually have a response from whoever was organising it. Said actually was Suffolk County Council disbanded a number of years ago. So
amazingly enough, never got round to telling us about.
So I think we can safely take that off the list.
Yes, I think we safely can. We'll now come to the Mid-Suffolk matters. The The East West Rail Consortium, Councillor Brewster, the representative there. We have previously discussed that. I don't know if you have anything to add, Councillor Brewster? No?
I'm there. Yes, obviously the meetings of the consortium are always held in Bedford or Milton Keynes or somewhere like that. The last one I attended there actually lasted just for an hour, and it was really about the East West Rail on the other side of Cambridge, as I said, it lasted for an hour, so there was a lot of driving to do, and which was obviously put expense on as well for the council. More recently, there is an eastern part of it, which obviously deals with the rail work going through Mid Suffolk, so it is some interest to us. Having said that, Councillor Smart at Ipswich Borough Council he really leads these meetings. There is a county council; it's organised by county council, yeah, I mean, I think probably we can rely on his, goodwill to keep it going at a good level. It is an interesting one because the one thing I was able to do when I did attend the second Bedford meeting was that members there were saying on that side of the country were looking for passenger transport, not sort of rail transport from Felixstowe or anywhere. And I was able to swing that a bit so that they did accept that that the commercial rail was needed, and that does appear to be going ahead. But as I said, the Ipswich Borough Council appear to be very strong in it, and I think they're probably saying all that we could say anyway.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wellham, you have something to add to this?
Well, yes, it's just that, we talk about climate change and we want to get more traffic off the road and onto the rail. And I feel we should be playing a much bigger part in this. And to rely upon a councillor in Ipswich who I've never had any feedback from him. We really ought to know what's going on.
Can I ask? Yeah, I get your point, Councillor Wellham. Can I ask Councillor Brewster if the East-West Rail Consortium addresses those points, or is it actually a different approach?
No, they do address the points, from my experience anyway. Obviously, they're very keen to get as much transport off the road onto rail, and it's certainly in their interest to go that way.
Do we know if the subscription is a substantial one?
Well, this is it. I don't know what the subscription is, so
Okay. Councillor Henriette, you have a point?
Yes, Chair. Following our briefing, I have actually tried to find out what subscription fee is for this, and we have yet to receive a response back from the East-West Rail Consortium. But once I have that, I will let members know what we would be charged.
It may be we need to table this until we have full information. Councillor Wellham makes a point that there is actually a requirement or a desire to get traffic off the roads. Although I have to say, the East-West railway line to Peterborough doesn't strike me as the sort of route that's going to take a great deal of pressure off the roads simply because I've used it. I'm not sure it's capable of doing so. Goods transport might be another matter, as Councillor Brewster referred to, the Felixstowe connection. And of course, it's our transport corridor, isn't it? The A14 and the railway line are more or less parallel each other.
Yes.
So maybe that has to be put to one side. We can return to that in discussion of recommendations, I think. The Joint Waste Management Board has been already discussed. So we are coming to the close of this document. The Joint Emergency Planning Policy Panel has also been discussed. And moving down, I believe that completes the content of that document.
Chair.
Yes. Go, Councillor Scarf. I missed you
Scarf.
completely. Your face is your icon isn't showing. I did miss that completely. I apologise.
Okay, that's all right. No, it's just a question on the East-West Rail Consortium. I wonder if, bearing in mind the changes to the infrastructure on the stations along the line, which passes through mid-Suffolk, I'm thinking of particularly Needham Market, Stowe Market and Thurston stations, which are all about to receive improvements for disability access, etc. Does that ever feed into the East-West Rail Consortium, Councillor Brewster? I wonder whether you might be able to advise on that.
Improvements to those stations, no, I've never heard a conversation about that at all, or even taken part in one. Obviously, it is important that we get those improvements done. Same as the Hawley Junction. The Hawley Junction certainly is spoken about because that's quite paramount to what's going on there. But I think the improvements to stations is probably a separate item, which some of it is obviously being worked on at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
It occurs to me that the entire model for rail infrastructure in this country is likely to change dramatically in the next few years as well. I mean, we're already seeing that in changes made to the franchise system and likely future changes. So there is a lot of this is up in the air. I have hands up from Councillors Maybury and Eppingham. Councillor Maybury.
Thank you very much. I was just, Chairman, I was just going to put this in the chat box, but hearing the comments about the train stations in certain areas in mid-Suffolk reminds me that the access points along the Sudbury branch line are also due to be renewed, if they haven't already been completed. So I think it is important. The Sudbury branch line is vitally important for Sudbury, and that is a contributing factor to the housing.
That's more north-south, Councillor Maybury, I think, though. That's sort of a branch off the main line from Norwich. So
well, that's absolutely fine. But if I don't mention it,
no, absolutely fine. I'm just trying. I'm aware the meeting has lasted nearly 2 hours already, and we have covered a lot of subjects.
Right.
No, thank you. Councillor Eppingham, did you have something to say?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think this whole issue of the East Wales line perhaps is a little bit more important because I think from an LEP point of view, it's part of the whole link between the East and the West in terms of the technology triangle within our area. So I think we should pay it some attention, in fact, because we are looking to be part of that technology map going forward.
Yep. No, I see your point. In fact, there is actually a section there. We've got Gateway 14, we've got the Stowe Market and the corridor and the A14 corridor, as I pointed out, it's part of the railway line. Okay, I think, members, we've covered a great deal of ground. I don't believe there are any other groups that we are able to discuss at this moment, but we do have some draft recommendations now to discuss, and I think that's the point at which we should move. The recommendations contained within the paper are 3.1, that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends to Council to remove the outside bodies no longer requiring representation based on information from the review as detailed in Appendix A and B. And I would suggest that what we do is no longer requiring representation being, and then we'd put in a list of those bodies that we can agree upon. So can I ask that as a proposal to start with, that be discussed in turn by turn. If Henriette could read us through the ones that we have now decided or we seem to believe should no longer be represented on. Henriette?
Yes, Chair. So we will be going as in the appendix A and B. So it'll be for Babergh, it'll be the Domestic Violence and Abuse Forum, East-West Rail Consortium, the Joint Waste Management Board, and the Suffolk Joint Emergency Planning Policy Panel, and the Suffolk Rail Policy Group. And for Mid-Suffolk, it will be the, we have included the East-West Rail Consortium, but I think we should take that off at the moment. So it will be
that appears to be more important to Mid-Suffolk than it does Babergh, to my mind.
Yeah, so for Mid-Suffolk, it will not be the East-West Rail Consortium. So for Mid-Suffolk, the panels we are suggesting to take off are the Joint Waste Management Board, the Suffolk Joint Emergency Planning Policy Panel, and I think that's it for
the
Mid-Suffolk.
Rail Policy Group.
Hang on.
The Rail Policy Group.
That's not even on this list.
Well, I think it needs to be.
Okay, we put
because
that
they don't meet anyway, so pointless, really.
I think perhaps the case is that we didn't actually elect any members for this one. But let me just check for you, Chair.
I think I'm still listed.
Are you?
I think so. I'm not certain.
But this was for Mid-Suffolk, Chair. The first list was for Babergh. Yes. I've just done the Mid-Suffolk, Chair. Yeah, so I've divided up in Babergh and then Mid-Suffolk. So it is as the two appendices are listed, apart from Mid-Suffolk, where we will still include the East-West Rail Consortium.
Well, I mean, that can, rather than include it, I think that might be something that Mid-Suffolk members wish to discuss further.
Yes.
I don't think we can make recommendations for Mid-Suffolk. And I think it appears likely that from what Mid-Suffolk councillors have said, that there is some debate about it. And that's really for the Mid-Suffolk members to deal with, isn't it?
Yes.
Jeff? I mean, what do Mid-Suffolk members think? Is that more or less your view?
Yes, Chair. It shouldn't be on the list of bodies to which we won't send representatives.
Okay.
But we may have a separate recommendation, which I guess would just be voted upon by Mid-Suffolk members of this committee.
I believe so, yes. That would be dependent on what you wish it to say. So the first recommendation, 3.1, is that those bodies no longer require representation. We remove the based on the information from the review. We just list those bodies that they no longer require. It's our recommendation that these no longer require representation. Does that sound like a suitable 3.1? Members?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Are you looking for a seconder?
I'm just sort of going through them. I mean, I'm not going to vote on them yet. I just wanted to establish what the first set of recommendations should be. If anybody says, no, that's completely wrong, now say so.
I'm happy with that, Chair.
That's fine. Then 3.2, I think we need to go back to the individual points we raised. If Henriette could go through the various matters that were raised as we went through our discussion in turn.
Yes, Chair. So the first recommendation you were discussing was that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends, presumably to Council, that the Haven Gateway Partnership participation is considered in terms of value and output. Or you can...
Yes, I believe that's the case. That it should be considered in terms of value, output, and relevance.
Okay.
Would that be fair? So make that 3.2. 3.3.
That a member of the Babergh District Council be elected to Home Start.
Right. Well, that Babergh District Council consider representation on the Home Start as Mid-Suffolk do.
Okay.
That's reasonable, I think. Members, any thoughts? Please, members, if at any point you have a point to make, just either raise your hand or speak.
Yes, I would support that, Chair.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for, some support.
So that would be that a member of the Babergh District Council consider representation to be elected to Home Start.
Well, that we should consider such representation.
Yeah, that's fine.
In line with Mid-Suffolk. I think that's an important point, the reasoning behind it. Then 3.4.
So 3.4, this was for Mid-Suffolk members. That was the that a Mid-Suffolk councillor be appointed or be recommended to be appointed as an observer to Mid-Suffolk Citizens Advice.
Yes, I believe that was what the wish of the meeting was. Councillor Caston, you had a point?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't think this is necessary to recommend this. The administration doesn't think that we need an observer on there, and I agree with them really. We have officers attending, we have regular officer meetings, and I just don't think it's necessary. I think the administration have made a decision on this, and
they have a perfect right to do. All we can do is make a recommendation. They can choose to act upon that recommendation or not. Councillor Scarf.
So I'd just like to say I don't agree with this recommendation.
Well, we will take each recommendation in turn, and we'll take a vote on each one. So you are obviously able to vote for or against or abstain on each motion, each recommendation. Councillors Wellham and Scarf, do you have anything to say on that?
Well, I feel very strongly that we should appoint.
Which is why we'll have a vote.
Yeah, and likewise, Chair, I mean, it's entirely up to each council scrutiny committee to determine what we wish to recommend.
We are,
whether you vote for it or not is entirely a personal decision, isn't it?
Yeah, we are, after all, making recommendations here, and it is going to be a matter for the Cabinet or the Council to decide in each instance. So we're doing our job, and that's all we can do. So that was 3.4 for Mid-Suffolk only. So we'll take each one in turn. 3.5, Henriette?
That a reporting mechanism for representation of outside bodies be established to provide valuable information to members and the public.
Yes, I think that's pretty much the will of most members here. I would also add 3.6 at this point then, that I don't know what other members' experience has been, but my own from the very word go has been that you get these appointments and you're just thrown into it without the clue of what you're doing until you get the first set of papers. And I think I'd like to see more support provided for members on outside bodies as to what they are, what they do, not just a broad outline of, oh, here it is, a piece of paper with some stuff on it, but actually some form of support in terms of what members can expect, what the responsibilities, and yes, bringing in this reporting structure. And I think that goes hand in hand with our reporting back. For us to be able to do that, there must be support given to members to do that. Any thoughts on that, Councillors McLaren, Wellham, Epinong? Oh, and Councillor, sorry, Jan Robinson has something to say as well. Jan, can you give us advice on that?
So, councillors, I agree, and that is something that we have. I have certainly in my objectives to actually get some more information about outside bodies, not just for councillors, but also for members of the public who think, you know, what on earth are these bodies that we're being? So, you know, it's one of my objectives to do that. I just wanted to check with councillors that they're very clear on the roles that they play when they're appointed to these bodies, not just by the council, but in their private capacity as well, because it could be something that councillors may be interested in getting further training on about the different roles and what those implications are for the councillor. As I say,
in fact, we can include support and training in the recommendation, I believe. Yes, now, I have comments available from councillors McLaren, Wellham and Epinong. I'll take them in that order. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that was something that was on my list of proposals because all thanks to Henriette for the spreadsheet. But the spreadsheet actually was a light bulb moment for me because it actually explained the whole range of outside bodies. And so that reiterates the thought that as new councillors or as councillors taking over from somebody else, that there should be some follow-up and educational sessions on a regular basis. Thank you.
Henriette, did you wish to comment at that point?
I do. That is why we are working on this bigger piece of information, including the alphabetic list of reps and outside bodies. And we are also going to organise something on the public website, both for members and for the public, to see exactly who is on the bodies and what they do and how frequent
Excellent.
they meet.
Would that appear on the scrutiny page, Henriette?
We have yet to establish where it should appear, as this would probably be for the whole of the council, not just a scrutiny function.
Fair enough.
Councillor
Wellham, thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I agree. Training, some sort of briefing would be very much appreciated. But just to say that when, I think I can speak for James as well, when we joined the Drainage Board, we were told that they would provide us with the training. They just haven't found an opportunity in, what is it, a year and a half? The police and crime panel, we do get a briefing from, I mean, it's run by the county. So we do get a briefing at our first meeting each year.
I think it's going to be very variable, but I do think the principle should be established.
Yeah, yes, but I think that our officers can probably get a lot of information from the bodies to put towards a briefing package or training or whatever for the members who are appointed.
And previous members may be able to, previous representatives may be able to give their input as well. And if there was a reporting structure, it would be easier for that to be achieved. Councillor Eppingham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm coming back to recommendation 3.5, which is relates to the feedback from the representatives on outside bodies. It seems to me that we ought to sort of quantify this a little bit, because there are many outside bodies and many meetings throughout the year, and perhaps we ought to have a quarterly standing item on the council agenda to receive such feedback.
I don't know what the mechanism would be. I think we're recommending that there be a mechanism. And I got a feeling that we'll have to discuss what the nature of that mechanism should be. And I think that's going to be a matter of discussion with officers and members and possibly the cabinet. Would you like to comment, Henriette and Janice?
I don't know, Jan, do you want to comment first?
Yeah, so Chair, what we don't want to do is to make this too onerous for councillors. You've got such a lot of work to do anyway. I think the easiest way to do it would be to have a template just with date of the meeting, some details on, and a short paragraph of what was covered, and then we could publish those as either part of the council meeting, or we could take it as a regular update to overview and scrutiny.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I don't know if it necessarily needs to go through overview and scrutiny, but it's got to go somewhere.
And we ought to take it to council then, but I wouldn't suggest that we do it quarterly. I think that would be too onerous. I think either 6 monthly or annually.
A template strikes me as a good idea. And of course, we have a recommendation later on that there be an annual review. But we'll come to that later. I think that fits well into the recommendation of an annual review. A template for reporting. We have tried to do this, but we haven't received very complete responses, shall we say, from members. And I understand there's a lot of stuff going on all the time. Councillor Eppingham, would that answer your query?
Yes, Chairman. I think Jan's idea of perhaps a twice a year templated report would be quite adequate. And
I mean, the meetings happen at different times, so maybe it would have some. It could be as it happens. Well, it's still fresh in the mind, to be honest with you.
Oh, indeed.
You know, that would be a way of dealing with it. Councillor Wellham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say we really don't want to have a formal report to council, because we would find that we're reporting more often than the cabinet members.
Yes, and in some cases more lengthily. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It can't be too onerous on the members, but it's not unreasonable to actually expect at least once a year some brief comment feedback from them, because they gain the experience in their own way and know the knowledge of these bodies, but we don't as a council. then get that experience necessarily relayed to us. So I think perhaps an annual, just a short bullet point description of the work that the body's been doing, etc. And if there is an exceptional item, one would expect that the member who's on the outside body would bring it back to the council at the very first opportunity, because it might be a funding crisis, it could be a constitutional crisis, it could be something where the council may be able to offer assistance. So
if it's urgent, there should be a facility to do that anyway. Common sense says so. I like the idea of a template, and I'd just like to point out that we do conduct an annual review. At least one of the recommendations will be that we conduct an annual review, as we are doing here, and we did last year. So that's listed as 3.2 on page 27. We'll obviously have a different numbering now. So I think we've got the meat and bones of that recommendation. If anybody doesn't want, got no further comments to make. Henriette, what was next?
Okay, so sorry, Chair, I was going to make another comment, but I can do that in a minute.
Okay.
So the final recommendation was that consideration for the council to appoint a representation on the Disability Forum as an observer, possibly, because I'm not sure they would have any rights. But maybe Jan can help me with that, because we discussed with Councillor Carter that he thought it was useful to have a representation on the Disability Forum.
If they want us.
If they wanted you.
I'm sorry, but they've been blunt about it. Okay, so was that for both Babergh and Mid Suffolk?
I think, well, that came from Councillor Carter, so I'm not sure whether that would be for both councils or not. That would be for the committee to decide.
That was for both councils. All right.
All right. The actual Disability Forum rather than Mid Suffolk, there is a Suffolk Disability Forum, which may be,
So both councils to inquire whether representation would be required or would be greeted favourably. I mean, fundamentally, we're having to ask somebody else. So our recommendation is to ask somebody else something.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's really just we have to say, right, we recommend we ask, and we'll have to, somebody will have to take it from there. Does that answer your question, Councillor Carter? Councillor Wellham?
Sorry, I was about to move on to another. Was that the last recommendation, or
the last one we covered in our sort of short list as we went through it?
I thought that if we're not going to delete from the list the East-West Rail Consortium, that we ought to make a recommendation that council consider paying the required subscription so that we can attend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a Mid Suffolk one, and I think what was the recommendation as currently written, Henriette?
The recommendation is that we accept for Mid Suffolk Appendix B, but that does not include the East-West Rail Consortium. So the East-West Rail Consortium remains on the list for representation.
I thought we were just, rather than saying referring to Appendixes A and Appendix B, we were actually going to list the bodies.
We will list the bodies, yes.
Yeah, I think, but otherwise it gets too confusing. There's no point in having recommendations that require you to make a reference to another document.
But if we don't make a recommendation specifically in respect of the East-West Rail Consortium, it will just remain on the list, but without a subscription being paid, so nobody attends.
Well, I got the impression that the intent was that we, although the recommendation is not to do it anymore, that you'd like to explore it further prior to actually having a decision made. But that must be a matter for Mid Suffolk. I don't think we're capable of making a recommendation with so many hypotheticals involved.
So, Chair, could we make a recommendation saying that the Mid Suffolk Overview and Scrutiny Committee explore further participation in the East-West Rail Consortium? Would that be a recommendation you could take forward?
I would be happy to take that forward.
Or would you say the Cabinet of Mid Suffolk rather than Overview and Scrutiny? We are the Overview and Scrutiny here. We're already exploring it, but I mean, it requires somebody in authority, if you like, to take a decision on
Chair, Chair, can I just come in? As I said
Yes.
before, this is a council decision, so
Yes.
all you can ever do is recommend that to council, that
that's
they
fine.
explore it further and with a view to either paying the subscription or not to be a member of it anymore. But that needs to be a recommendation to council.
Yeah, right. So recommendation to council. We can't recommend to ourselves. Okay.
Okay.
My apologies. I was the one person who should have turned my phone off and didn't. Right. Okay, so let's go through the recommendations in turn.
Just one moment, Chair.
And then we will get proposers, seconders, and vote on each recommendation in turn.
Let's find them again. So let's see if I can find. We have 8. So the first one is 3.1, that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends to council that to remove the outside bodies no longer required representation based on the information from the review as detailed in Appendix A and Appendix B, but we will change that to no longer required representation as listed.
Yeah,
below.
the lists for both Babergh and Mid Suffolk.
And then we'll list it below.
Be separate lists. All right.
So 3.
Those 3 point. So that's 3.1.
3.1. 3.2.
Let's deal with 3.1 first.
Right.
Let's take a proposer and a seconder.
I propose, thank you.
Councillor Osborne proposing, seconder.
Happy to second, thank you.
Councillor Wellham seconding. Then we need to take a vote on that by roll call.
Yes, Chair. So, Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
4.
Councillor Epignon.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And then 3.2.
3.2 is that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends to Council that the Haven Gateway Partnership participation is considered in terms of value, output, and relevance.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
That the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends to Council that the Haven Gateway Partnership participation is considered in terms of value, output, and relevance.
Is that strong enough? What do members think?
Chair?
Yes, Councillor Epignon.
Chairman, I'm not sure that's a terribly meaningful recommendation.
No, it isn't, is it?
I thought that the thrust of it was that we were doubtful that our continued membership represented good value, etc.
Okay, so, let's find a wording that states that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee cannot see that those points have been represented and that both councils should consider withdrawal from the Haven Gateway Partnership. Does that cover it?
More or less from my perspective, Chairman.
That's my view as well. Can we reword that, Henriette?
Okay.
It does not, that we cannot, it's not been demonstrated that the Haven Gateway Partnership demonstrates those points, value, etc., and that both councils should consider withdrawal. So recommendation will be a decision. Councillor Osborne, you had a point to make?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing, having come from that direction in my early life, you'll find that most of that Haven Gateway was associated with Tendon District Council and Harwich and etc. So where we stand on this, I have no idea. But
me neither. It's
all I can say perhaps is that this is an area that is taken away from any one of us, either Mid Suffolk, well, not so much Mid Suffolk, but definitely Babergh, to the point that it's a Tendon District Council concern, and most of the funding I believe comes from goes to Tendring District Council.
Yeah,
Thank
it's Harwich and Felixstowe effectively, and none of us are involved in Harwich or Felixstowe directly, just peripherally. So,
sorry, Chair, can you just...
have you got a wording, Henriette? Sorry.
No, not really, not for the last part, because I have the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends that the Council consider withdrawal from the Gateway Haven Partnership as the committee. What exactly is it you are?
Committee feels it cannot demonstrate. It does not demonstrate. What were the points we said originally? Relevance was one.
Value.
Value and relevance.
Value, relevance, and...
Well, it was output, but that's maybe not the correct word there.
Value and relevance.
Okay.
Okay. Councillors Grandon. Councillor Grandon, your hand is raised, and Councillor Mabry, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry I didn't comment on this earlier. I'm having quite a lot of trouble with my technology here. But I seem to recall that when Councillor John Hinton was on this board, he was very involved and found it very useful, and I seem to recall that it had some implications for the A12 and so on as well, and had some implications on his ward.
I believe Councillor Grandon, he wanted it to have some relevance to the A12, but I don't believe that it ever did.
Okay.
I mean, we're making a recommendation. It's not been demonstrated. If it's going to be demonstrated, let somebody demonstrate it, is what I think we're trying to suggest here. Again, we're only making a recommendation, not a decision.
Okay, I'm happy with that then.
No,
Thank
I mean,
you.
that's my point. I mean, you know, I was just that we are not making a decision here. We're making a recommendation. That was the mood I got from the discussion in the meeting. Councillor Councillor Mabry, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on the committee. May I comment or not?
Well, just briefly, yes, please.
Right, thank you. My suggestion would be that you ask the respective chief executive officers for the two areas as to whether they think that it is of use.
Well, in effect, our recommendation to Cabinet will bring that about anyway. This is a means of asking without actually asking. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was just going to make the point. On the Mid-Suffolk list, it lists Councillor Brewster, who we've heard talk today, the evidence of the Haven Gateway Partnership, as the Babergh District Council substitute. Now,
he's the Mid-Suffolk Council.
Well, he's listed as the Babergh District Council substitute because there's 1+1 substitute. Okay. Now, if we're two sovereign bodies, one would have thought that we would each have a representative. I mean, I'm not necessarily in favour of the Haven Gateway Partnership membership, but that does create an area of confusion because you can't have a substitute for one. No,
it's a misprint, I believe, Councillor Scarf.
May I clarify? Sorry, Chair, that is obviously a mistake on administration apart.
It's a misprint.
Councillor Brewster is the representative for Mid-Suffolk on Haven Gateway Partnership.
And Councillor Holt for Babergh.
That's clarified that then. Thanks.
Fine. So on that proviso, we're making a recommendation that this be re-examined by whoever, Cabinet, I would guess, Council, I would guess. That would bring about the sort of responses from the chief executives that one would expect. But I think we have enough evidence, considering at least one of the representatives doesn't think it's worth the time. And it may not be for Mid-Suffolk, but it may be for Babergh. But that's yet to be demonstrated. We can make the recommendation. So do we have a proposer for that?
Yeah, happy to propose, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Osborne. And second?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Councillor Epignon, thank you very much. Can we take a roll call vote?
Can I just ask, was it Councillor Epignon who?
It was Councillor Epignon, yes.
Epignon and the proposer?
Councillor Osborne.
Osborne, sorry.
No problem.
Right, I will be doing a roll call again.
Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
4.
Councillor Epignon.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin,
4.
Councillor McCraw,
4.
Councillor McLaren,
4.
Councillor Muller,
4.
Councillor Osborne,
4.
Councillor Scarf,
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Move on to the third recommendation, Henriette.
That a member of the Babergh District Council consider representation to be elected to the Home Start. So that was actually both councils, sorry. That a member of, hang on, let me just.
That representatives for both councils should be considered and discussions opened with Home Start.
That's correct. That representation from both councils be considered to be elected to the Home Start in line with Mid Suffolk. Actually, I'm sorry, Chair, that I got this wrong. That a member of the Babergh District Council be considered to be elected to Home Start in line with Mid Suffolk District Council.
That's fine. Who was the proposer for that?
We haven't got one yet, Chair.
I will propose it.
Councillor McLaren proposing.
Yes, Chair.
And a seconder, please. I think this will be for Babergh.
I'll second it, Chair.
That's Councillor Gould. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So okay, we take a roll call vote on that third recommendation.
So you would only want the Babergh members to vote?
Only the Babergh members, yes.
Right. So Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
And I believe that's all. Is that correct? That's all, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. The fourth recommendation.
Right, Chair. The fourth recommendation is that consideration that Babergh District Council consider representation to be appointed as an observer to Mid Suffolk Citizen Advice. Does that make sense?
No, sorry, I lost that one.
So have I. Do apologise, Chair.
This was for Mid Suffolk members only. I believe the effect
is for Mid Suffolk members. So
in line with Babergh's representation or on observer status for citizens' advice, that Mid Suffolk reconsider their representation.
Okay, so that
and this will be for the Mid Suffolk members only to vote upon, so we'll need proposers and seconders for that. Does that meet your wishes, Mid Suffolk members?
Yes.
Yes, it does. I'm happy to propose.
We have Councillor Wellham proposing
that
be reconsidered and Councillor Scarf seconding.
Okay.
So we'll carry out a roll call vote on that.
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Mid
Councillor
Suffolk
Carter. So Mid Suffolk members. Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
Against.
Okay. Councillor Epkin-Young.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
So, Chair, that is 5 votes for and 1 against.
Okay, so that's carried and that will go forward as a recommendation. The fifth recommendation.
Lost the fifth recommendation, one moment. So that was that a reporting mechanism for representation outside bodies be established to provide valuable information to members and the public.
Okay, and we could perhaps mention potentially with a template to feed in to the annual review by overview and scrutiny.
Of a template.
So we're proposing a basic structure, and yes, we're also proposing a place where the report goes, and I think that would be sufficient.
To be presented to the joint ONS.
Annual review.
Annual review.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. So would you like me to read that again?
Yes, if you could.
Okay, that reporting that reporting mechanism in the form of a template for representation of outside bodies be established to provide valuable information to members and the public to be presented to the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Annual Review.
Yep, we'll have to come back to that joint annual review in a separate recommendation and then insert it in front of this one, but we'll do that. That's the one originally listed at 3.2. So do I have a proposer for that mechanism?
Chairman, I'm happy to propose.
Councillor Epignon, seconder? Well, I'm happy to second that. Oh, Councillor Caston, I'll take your seconding on that. So that's Epignon and Caston proposing, seconding. Can we take a roll call vote for both councils?
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
4.
Councillor Epignon.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next recommendation, would this be the 6th?
Correct, Chair. Let me find it. So the next one is that support and training be established for members when appointed as a representative on outside bodies.
Yep, that covers it. I'm happy to propose that. Councillor Carter seconding. Yep, got Councillor Carter seconding, I think.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, let's take a roll call for both councils, please.
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
4.
Councillor Epignon.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, that was all the ones we've discussed so far. We now return to 3.2 on the papers, which establishes the principle of an annual review once again. Could you reread that from the papers, please, Henriette?
Yes, Chair. Let me just find it on my papers. So, that a review of the list of outside bodies be conducted on an annual basis, and that the upgrade of that review be included in an annual report presented to this committee.
I think that's perfectly adequate. I don't think it'll be as exhaustive as this year has been. I imagine that much like some of the other jobs we do, that every second year will be more in depth, but we keep it going on an annual basis. So can I have a proposer for that recommendation, which I believe we should probably list as 5 and move the other 2 down 1, because then it would come in just before the annual review referred to in the next recommendation.
Chair,
Yeah.
You would like this 3.2 to be recommendation 5?
Yes, I believe so, and then that would make 5, 6 and 6, 7, and it would actually read logically in the order of the recommendations.
Okay.
That's just a matter of presentation. Okay, I think I see Councillor Carter. Are you proposing, Councillor Carter?
Yes, I'm happy to propose.
And the seconder, please. Councillor Epignon. Okay, so can we take a roll call vote of both councils, please?
Certainly. So that will be 3. Just one moment, Chair. I'm just going to get this sorted. My notes. Okay, so Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Caston.
4.
Councillor Epignon.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Grandin.
4.
Councillor McCraw.
4.
Councillor McLaren.
4.
Councillor Muller.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Scarf.
4.
Councillor Wellham.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Henriette. Thank you very much, members, witnesses, all, and officers, because we've given a pretty decent coverage on that.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Wellham. Sorry, Henriette.
I believe we have a further recommendation.
Oh, I missed one. Did I? What's that?
That was that the Mid-Suffolk District Council explore further participation or representation in relations to the East-West Rail Consortium.
Quite correct, my apologies. So this would be a matter for Mid-Suffolk members. Councillor Wellham, are you proposing?
Yeah, happy to propose.
And a seconder from Mid-Suffolk, Councillor Eppingham. This is East-West Rail Consortium, which is of relevance to Mid-Suffolk more than Babergh. Can we take a roll call vote, please, Henriette?
Certainly. Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Caston.
For.
Councillor Eppingham.
For.
Councillor Muller.
For.
Councillor Scarf.
For.
Councillor Wellham.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. My apologies, members, for missing one. So we've now got a total of 8 recommendations.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, I'm glad I can still count. Thanks very much, members. As I say, we've covered an area that I don't think has had much light thrown on it. I hope we've done so. We'll now move, I think, to the next item on the agenda. Sure, you're only too pleased to hear that. And this is item 9, the forthcoming decisions list. All members have had a chance, I hope, to have a look at that. Are there any comments on that? Not, then it's for noting anyway, and it is something in constant review by the chairs at their meetings each month. So we move on. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my documents at the moment. To items 10 and 11, which are respectively the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk overview and scrutiny work plans. And these are presented on from page 47 of the reports. You can see that we have a schedule pretty much taking us up to April, which for the moment we have kept open because there's a possibility of the county council elections, there's a possibility of some form of purdah. But there's plenty of time if we need to fill that in. Any comments on those? You use the raise hand function. No? Oh, Councillor Wellham. Councillor Wellham? Your hand is raised.
Sorry, yeah. I don't know if I can propose that we accept both of them, since one is for Mid-Suffolk, one is for Babergh, but certainly I feel that that's fine. Both of them are fine.
I'm sure there's no necessity for, they're only for noting. There's no need for item 12 because we have already dealt with the confidential minutes. So we shall pass that. And the same goes for item 13. Fundamentally, members, this concludes the meeting. I believe I'm right. Sorry, Henriette?
Chair, I'm not sure whether Councillor Ayres would like to mention anything about the Gypsy and Traveller.
Oh, my apologies. I was something that was going to be brought up. We will just briefly go back into this as a subject we didn't discuss. The option is there available. There is a group that Councillor Ayres would like to discuss. I'm not sure this is an appointment or an internal external organisation, but it's of some interest. Councillor Ayres?
Thank you, Chair. It's just that we do meet sort of every other month. We have a meeting next Monday, but I do feel all the councillors should be aware of the problems that they're having. They're not always given the respect or whatever. I know there are problems. Obviously, I know about that, and they're all treated as a nuisance. But there are 5 different groups of travellers. For example, they have a big burial site at Long Melford, which has been with this particular family for 300 years. And I think we really need, and we are fighting to get some sort of traveller transit site. Because we don't have transit sites, that's when they park up in places where they shouldn't be. So I would like to give a report at some stage of the progress that we're trying to make, but it's a very important committee, and I do value Jane being on that committee with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ayres. Well, I think we've given the subject. Councillor Gould, you wish to say something?
Well, just to second what Councillor Ayres has said, really, that I feel it is a committee that does move things along and it does scrutinise in some detail what's happening. And I'd like to think that the members on the committee do offer some fresh ideas and support to the paid officers who are dealing with this particular group of society.
As I recall,
to second what Councillor Ayres has said there, really.
As I recall, Babergh has no sites, Gypsy or Traveller sites, whereas Mid Suffolk does. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Thank
At
you.
the moment. And the other problem is Essex, in fact, don't have any. And I've been told by Suffolk County Council that if we have them, they'll send them all up from Essex. So there's a lot of discrimination there, I'm afraid.
Okay. Tough subject. Right. Members, thank you all for your considerations today. As I say, we've covered a subject that doesn't normally get aired. I think we've covered it in some depth, although we could obviously speak more. But that concludes this meeting. The next Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting will be on Monday, the 14th of December 2020, 9:15 a.m. for a setup and starting at 9:30 p.m. I'll now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.